It's summertime, and as the song goes, the living is easy. The sun is warm and the air is sweet. Come and join me in the cool of the night with a good book or two. While we're away, instead of the normal Nighttime on Still Waters programme, for a couple of weeks we'll be spending a little time together, enjoying some readings. The stern doors are open to the night, the coffee pot is still warm, and the biscuit barrel is close by. Make yourself comfortable, and we'll begin. Still waters do not run deep. They run to about 4 feet as a rule. But they're deep enough for me, and for thousands of boaters who call them home. The narrow and broad canals, the navigations and rivers, the many miles of channeled water that we circulate on in a slow game of musical chairs, are the highways of an alternative England. Our waterway system was built for a purpose. It was one of humankind's great achievements. It's a map within a map, a parallel country, with its own landmarks and place names. We live on the other side of your map, in a narrow country, and we navigate by different stars. And so ends the book that I have chosen for this year's summer reading suggestion. It's from Boater, A Life on England's Waterways by Jo Bell, and published in 2025 by HarperCollins. It's one I think that will appeal to anyone interested in canals, canal life, history, and all the diversity and complexities of human relationships. And I realise that I've actually referred to Jo and her book in an earlier episode this year, Finding Erica. But I think that it deserves a little more of the spotlight. Jo is a trained archaeologist and a poet. In fact, she was the inaugural Poet Laureate of the Canal and River Trust and Poetry Society from 2013 to 2015. And this combination of a poet's eye and imagination with the rigour and analytical thought of an archaeologist make for a wonderful combination. Yes, this book is about the history of the navigation, but also of loves lost and found, lost once more and then found. It's rich in historical research and detail, and with personal experience. Quirky, sometimes idiosyncratic in all the right ways. It's a deeply personal view of life afloat. And in doing so, Jo manages to capture the frustratingly indefinable qualities of canal life so well. The loose community of friendly, belligerent, gregarious, solitary, helpful and contrarian people who make up this long linear village that is strung along the liquid trenches and aquatic arteries of Britain. And the strange, fluid, and not always easy relationship that exists between those who live on the network and bank people. And in some ways, Boater provides an alternative history, or to be much more accurate, a parallel history, one that runs alongside the mainstream histories in the way that the railways and canals run beside each other. And like all historians, and apparently unlike most politicians, Jo is acutely aware of the fluid shapes that histories can take. The past is what happened, she notes. History is what we tell ourselves about what happened. In the introduction, she writes, I call this meta-history. It is solid history, told by me, a historian and poet, and seen through the prism of my own experience. Plenty of boaters will disagree with my take on something or other. The boating community is full of naysayers and has as many opinions as any other community. To which he adds this footnote, not true. The boating community has far more opinions than most other communities, and we are more vocal than most in expressing them. And so, boater is a tapestry of threads of the past, recent and much older, layered and woven together, of great events and small, tragedies and milestones, national and personal. And I did learn a lot from it. For example, the barge pole that sits atop every narrowboat cabin and has become the quotidian 10-foot barge pole apparently is not called a barge pole, but a long shaft. And there's also a way to keep ropes clean in winter, though unfortunately she doesn't tell us how. Or that the beams of wood that hold up a boat when it's in dry dock are called bostocks. And also that the stillness of canal water, its lack of movement, of current, was not simply a consequence of construction, but was a property upon which the whole venture of developing canals depended. In fact, the whole point, according to canal architect James Brindley, was that the boats navigating the system should not have to beat against the current, but utilize a property characteristic of boats moving on still water, described by the Scottish civil engineer John Scott Russell in 1834 as the wave of translation. It refers to the way that a boat creates a heap of water, a hydraulic roller coaster on which the boat can ride for the rest of the journey, with occasional input from horses. It is essentially surfing on a wave of its own making. A lot of the book raises that smile of recognition and the odd, "Oh good, it's not just me then" reaction. She writes, "The greatest difference between boat life and bank life is not the sense of place, but the sense of time. Every boat carries its past with it." But something I hadn't fully appreciated until reading Jo's book was the difference in the way we read and experience the land. And it's absolutely true. As Jo observes, you try finding the major canal landmarks like Bumble Hole, Sutton Stop, or even Bugbrook on a road map. They're just not there. Key geographical points, the cities, if you like, of our landscapes, Braunston, Crick, or even Lapworth and Kingswood Junction. They're often no more than small villages, indicated on a signpost on some dual carriageway bypass that cars fly by. We live by, as Jo frequently notes, different maps, and therefore experience a very different landscape and geography. She writes, "Underneath that question about where the canals go is the sense that there is indeed an alternative nation inside your own, a slightly alien country inside the familiar one. For some people, the feeling is unsettling, like discovering that the door in your wardrobe leads to Narnia. True enough, our waterways connect places that don't exist, or that do exist in a very different way. To navigate this nation within a nation, boaters use maps that make sense of it. Most have a strong allegiance either to Nicholson maps or to Pearson's maps. I'm a Nicholson girl myself. There are 7 volumes of these guides to the waterways of England and Wales. They have shiny red covers, spiral bindings, and they are surprisingly resilient when dropped in the canal and fished out again. Every one of my Mcloughlin volumes has deckled pages and handwritten notes. Dreadful pub. Splendid moorings. Secret path to railway station. Chicken farm. Pub landlord very peculiar. The Mcloughlin maps are disorienting for the bank dweller, because on every page they show only the canal corridor. Through 7 volumes, the thin blue line of the waterway proceeds, through lock flights, past boatyards, where you can fill up with water or empty your toilet tank, and occasionally touches on villages or historic towns where you can shop for provisions. All of these are faithfully recorded, but anything that falls outside the narrow corridor of canal life is excluded. However, the section that I most want to share, and I think sums up the experience of anyone coming to boat life, is this, and it's from the chapter called Boater. Sometimes I have trouble with my sciatic nerve. I get up from my chair to make a cup of tea, and all at once it seems that my leg is about to fall off. The smallest movement is difficult and painful for these days. And then suddenly it isn't. I'll be tying a shoelace or taking the bins out when some piece of essential machinery drops into place, and everything is running smoothly again. It was just like that as I learnt to boat. For a long time, everything was difficult and anxiety-inducing. There were always 3 old men watching me with their arms folded when I tried to turn the boat around in a winding hole. Winding, incidentally, is pronounced as in north wind, not as in winding a watch. The wind is supposed to help you around, not that it ever does. I hated this manoeuvre, which usually ended up with a crew member stuck in a thorn bush as they tried to keep the boat from scraping through the undergrowth. Often I felt that it would be simpler to just keep going, abandon the attempt to turn, and choose instead to travel for the rest of my life in one direction. I also hated mooring up in a tight space. Parallel parking is an acquired skill even in a car with crisp brakes. It seemed physically impossible in a 20-ton boat, which kept moving under its own weight when I stopped the engine. It was awkward every time. And of course, there was always an old man watching me with his arms folded. But I was managing time better now. I had been granted a taste of working boat life and its people, but I did not have to operate like them. I didn't have a cargo to deliver. Boating wasn't my job. Tinker's days could be shorter and slower. Why, I might even venture to get off every now and then and go for a walk or spend the afternoon in a nearby town. Eventually it dawned on me that this was the entire point. For most liveaboard boaters on the living canals, the point is not to get from A to B, but to enjoy the bit in between. Journeys became more leisurely, and my crew more relaxed. We would tie up mid-afternoon in a nice spot to sit on the towpath with a book, chat to neighbouring crews, or sit on the cabin top watching sunsets. We would light a barbecue. Time on Tinker became joyful for all of us rather than exhausting. A great many sausages were eaten. The nerve-jangling discomfort of learning a new life began to ease, until one late autumn evening in Derbyshire, it disappeared entirely. I had spent all day at the tiller, starting on the wide and airy River Trent, and crossing the hurly-burly waters of the four-way junction at Trent Lock to join the canal. Like the novice that I was, I had badly misjudged the length of my journey. The sky was a purpling dove grey as dusk deepened almost to darkness. But Tinker was still on the move and I was berating myself. You're still crap at this. You'll never get the hang of it. The honeypot village of Willington smelt of apples and wood smoke. I was tired, hungry, and just in time for an arranged meeting with a crew member in the pub, but every mooring space was occupied. The canal bank was an unbroken line of boats. It was a floating village whose residents were perfectly at home here, and who tomorrow would be perfectly at home with a different arrangement of neighbours. And my next chance to moor was a mile ahead. And even if there were a space there, it would be fully dark when I reached it. The cabin windows of the moored boats were buttery squares of warmth in the twilight. Wood smoke and savoury cooking smells drifted over the water. These boaters had been sensible enough to tie up early, before night fell. Sad them, I thought. I felt lonely and incompetent, and there were no biscuits left. As Tinker crawled along the channel, I saw one last mooring space, a slim block of dark water between two boats. It looked about 6 inches shorter than the boat. Damn it! Surely I had no chance of squeezing in. The boat tied up in front of this space, the boat which I would hit hard if I cocked up the entry to a tight space as usual, was an immaculate working boat. Of course it was. "Make your mistake slowly," Joe Hollingshead would say. In that November nightfall, it felt as if this move had a great deal riding on it. Was I always going to be an incomer, revving the engine and fumbling every move? Or could Tinker and I move together, work together, do the thing gracefully? My long day had not been wasted. On the swirling river waters and the smooth water of the canal, I had finally begun to feel in my bones the slow dance of boat and steerer. This boat, this steerer. Come on then, let's not cock it up. Tinker's nose slid gently forward to touch the bank exactly where it needed to be, and a touch of the tiller guided the back end in behind it. A half-secondary reverse engine brought her gently away from the working boat without so much as a kiss, and we swung into the bank with inches to spare between us and the boat behind. Tinker purred quietly as she came to rest. I stepped off nonchalantly to tie up, as if I did this sort of thing all the time. It was the smallest possible victory, but a victory all the same. And it was possible. I caught a trace of cigarette smoke on the autumn air, and there was an old man watching me from the back of the working boat, arms folded. I glared at him. "Nicely done," he said. And then it wasn't painful anymore. Tinker and I were a single entity when we moved. It wasn't a mystical New Age revelation, but the deep comfort that comes from a learned skill which becomes part of my selfhood. Perhaps a toddler feels this when she first becomes a confident walker. I suppose I'd simply put in enough hours on Tinker to fully feel the interaction of three bodies, her shape, my shape, the water beneath us. At any rate, I no longer had to think about where to put the tiller when manoeuvring between obstacles. It just moved the right way under my hand, as the steering wheel does for a driver. I knew when Tinker was happy in the water, when a tangle of weed had clogged the propeller. I knew by the way she swam how much water was left in my domestic water tank. When the canal signalled that we should slow down by throwing up a low breaking wave in our wake, we slowed down. In a tight corner, I recalled the old boater's trick of rowing the tiller a few times to get some extra turning power, rather than holding it steady. The Manchester Central Library frieze had advised me to get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. I laid no claim to wisdom, but I had gained a little understanding. I had become a happy little cog in the slow machine as I thought of the canal system. Don't get me wrong, I still haven't got the hang of it entirely. My incompetence, like my sciatica, occasionally flares up, and there are many moments when I make a monumental ass of myself, jamming the boat into a tricky angle or allowing the wind to pin me to the bank. I have messed up easier moorings than that one in Willington. I will always make mistakes. I just try to make a new one every time. And at those moments, of course, there's always an old man on the bank watching me with his arms folded. And I like to think I make his day just a little bit better. I'll continue with the greetings and shout-outs when we return to our normal service. However, I do just want to quickly say thank you, and please don't worry to whoever it was that contacted me about losing their wallet and missing the Lockwheeler subscription. The contact forms are anonymised, and so I wasn't able to contact and reassure you personally, so sorry about that, but please don't worry. However, your recent move to the lodge in Perthshire Woodlands sounds absolutely amazing. I'd love to hear a lot more about that. Maybe even a short night view from your window. And talking of which, thank you for those continuing to send them in. I am collecting them together so I can finish each episode with one. And once again, I'll resume this once we've returned to our normal format. But for tonight, I'll finish with a brief description about what's outside our window right now. We're afloat on glassy water, and thick banks of reed and marsh woundwort, their purple spears glowing like embers in the gloaming, are on the opposite bank. Puffs of bedstraw form foaming crests to the wavelets of sedge and rush and willow herb. Hogweed and hemlock have begun to die back, glowing gold in old age. All day they've been alive with butterflies and damselflies, and dragonflies have darted and hovered like cumbersome prehistoric biplanes, alien and ancient, yet so totally natural. Clumps of arrowhead, beginning to flower, and rigid sprays of water plantain hem the boat bow and stern. Behind us, the hump of a bridge, its metalwork angular and inky, projected onto the sky of deepening blue. And above it, the moon, just past her first quarter, hangs heavy and waxing to the southeast, bordered by the silhouetted outlines of ash and hawthorn. The flicker of bat flight, a distant collared dove sighs a lullaby to the moon. Rings pulse and fade on the water's mirrored surface. And towering over us rise the 5 poplars that have cast upon us their welcome shade when the heat has risen. The same 5 poplars that featured in the Christmas heron. Although Maggie and I spotted a heron earlier, they've not been so visible on this visit. And that one seemed to have had other things on his mind than think about waylaying us in chat. But then, this isn't Christmas Eve, and the canal and all the life it shelters have other things on their mind. So, this is the narrowboat Erica, signing off for the night and wishing you a very restful and peaceful night.